Well, you're asking the right questions. And, I mean, I think,
Writer questions, maybe, hopefully.
well, you're asking the right question about reality, which we live in a time of unreality and or disconnection from reality.
Hmm.
And so I mean, it's been a focus of mine for a long time because I find that people who well, the language I'm using is that of the simulation. A simulation is a false reality.
Hmm.
And what I find is that when people get trapped or caught in that, it does not make their lives better. It does not elevate their agency as persons. It does not make their relationships more respectful or trusting. I mean, all the, I guess I don't want to oversimplify it, but a large number of the problems that we face today in the world are because we accept a false reality that we choose because it actually relieves us of responsibility.
That's interesting. That's interesting. I think I agree with most of that. Absolutely. Um, um, one note that I would make is that this false reality. Can you hear me? Can you hear me
Yeah,
okay? Yeah.
I'm looking at a some glare coming through. Go keep talking.
From me? Oh,
Yeah.
that's
No,
weird.
no, from me. It's
Okay.
so I'm wondering where this is
Okay.
coming from.
Um, is that so I do agree with you, and then we're left with the question of how do we address the problem of getting lost
Yeah.
in our own worlds of make believe, so to speak.
Yes.
And so the proposed solution is a map. And it's as simple as that in a way. It's a map that helps us see a little bit about the behind the scenes workings of reality.
Well, before we get too far into this, um, where's my phone? I got to keep track of time. Hold on. Sorry. We'll edit. That is strange. Oh well. Okay.
Mhm.
We're back together. Where did my phone go? Anyway, not important. Before we go into this, let's have you do a little introduction. So
Of
let
course,
me begin by welcoming people, and and then we'll go from there. And how do I pronounce your name? How do you like
Louise,
Luis?
Louise von
Okay.
Paumgarten. Yes.
Okay. All right. So here we go. Hello, everyone. Excuse me. Hello, everyone. This is Ed Breniger, host of the Eddie Network podcast, and my guest today is Luis von von Garten.
Paumgarten? Yes.
Okay, I'm close enough.
Pretty close.
I'll let you give us your correct pronunciation. But I'm glad you're here,
Louise.
Luis. We've been interacting for some time on LinkedIn, and I really appreciate your thoughtfulness and in um, you're willing to share what you're thinking and discovering as you pursue your own
Mhm.
set of questions about things. So give us a little idea who you are and what this thing called the Abstractionist papers is all about.
Okay, so thank you, Ed. Thanks for having me on the show, and vice versa. I appreciate your feedback over the last couple of years on social media. That was very helpful, not just you, but everybody who gave me feedback. It's all been incorporated in some way into the work. But so the Abstractionist Papers is a book I published earlier this year, um, in February, and it's a book about reality from first principles. Um, and it's unique. It's the first of it. It's the only one, the only piece of work that I know of that starts from a special place of making a distinction between two different realms that we occupy concurrently, but usually don't mind it, which are the realms of interpretation and the realms of causation, the worlds of meaning and happening. And so the work picks up from there and through and walks the reader through a number of steps to get from a working theory of mind all the way to what we call at the end the process universe, which is a different way of seeing the reality and the universe as it progresses. Um, and it took a number of years to complete this project that started back in 2017 officially. Um, and as I said, it was just published earlier this year. It's free. It's available for free at welcometothebluespace.com. And now I'm going through this dissemination phase. I consider this podcast to be my one podcast book tour. So thank you for having me on the show.
My pleasure.
Um,
Where did this start? When did this question that you've sought to answer begin?
that's a difficult question to answer, actually. Um, the way I describe it today is I had a lifetime of over 20 years, or about 20 years, I guess, of patent practice experience, writing patent applications, learning to see the world in a particular way. Um, then there was a moment of disruption in my personal life, a divorce. And then there was some sort of sense making period. And during that sense making period, I used the tools I had in the shed, the different ways of seeing that come with the practice. Um, and the work started there. I felt a distance from the kids, of course. I wasn't with them every day anymore. And in a way to fill that gap, but mostly to make sense of things, I started writing letters to them. But I wasn't writing to them as kids. I was writing to them as people.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were written for kids, which when I was done writing some of them, I wrote a few of them, then it occurred to me maybe I should be writing stories instead. And so I started to write stories. And the first story I wrote related to this is called Nimbin and the Abstractionist. And that is officially the birth of natural reality. It's the first story, the first piece of work that deals with some of the concepts that then we nowadays can read in the book: red space, blue space, orthogonality, incoherence. So that was all laid out in that one story back in 2017. Well, sorry, 2018 by the time the story was done. And then after the story was done, I looked at it and I still felt very incomplete in a way because nobody could understand the story. So then I started a blog and started publishing explanations essentially to what the concepts meant in the story. And that went on for years. That went on for a very long time, maybe 3 or 4 years. And then once I looked at all that, then the sense of incompleteness came from, I got to get this project. Like, this project started as something for the kids, a way for me to guide them in a way from afar. But by the time I was done with the explanations of the story, it was clear to me that project needed to sort of come out of the closet, because it wasn't really a story anymore. It was a map of reality. And so then I went through a phase of just intense writing to try to put this thing together. Originally I thought there were going to be maybe 3 or 4 books. and I seriously overcomplicated the project. Um, but eventually, after a solid year of daily writing, I was able to put something together earlier this year, and I continue to edit it to this day. Um, and so, I know that's a long way around the block, but that's kind of how it came
Yeah.
together.
Well, it sounds like you're responding to some moments in your life that were troublesome or hard, and that out of that has come something of beauty, of something of worth. And that, I mean, this concerns something I've been thinking about that, in our world, we like to think that we should be pursuing happiness, and as if that's the goal, when happiness is really a symptom of something deeper, of which is the overcoming of obstacles and the overcoming of challenges, and of seeing things in a clearer light that then puts us in a position to strive to achieve something more than what we have done. That happiness is not a final state, but rather an interim state of
Mhm.
motivation to go beyond. And it sounds like this is what you have been going through for almost a decade now, you know.
I believe that's what we're all going through. And it's so interesting that you started from happiness because the first letter I wrote to the kids was exactly about that idea. I was sort of trying to address the pursuit of happiness idea. Um, and I think for many of us, it doesn't necessarily take long to realize if you're pursuing happiness, you're not going to get it that way. It's just like you can't catch the butterfly. You plant the garden and then the butterfly comes, that sort of thing. Um, and so the letter started from there, but because I couldn't figure out like a formula for happiness, what I explained to them, the solution I had at the time was, well, if we split the world into two parts, not the world, but say your mind, you're either happy or you're not happy, then maybe the solution to the happiness problem is to manage the unhappiness problem. Let's go the back way. And that's where that started, which I still think it's a great idea, by the way. Um, it leaves you room to do exactly what you described, which is a process of emergence, where through your own incompleteness, you
Hmm.
continue to pursue bigger perspectives. And that's the satisfaction you get. That's the happiness you're talking about, is knowing that you're on that journey.
I moved back to my hometown 22 months ago after being gone for 53 years, vowing never to return. But I returned,
Mm,
and people have asked me, "Are you happy to be home?" And I say, "Well, it's not that simple. I see the things that I saw which said I don't want to live here anymore are still present, but the people that I knew back then are here too, and I'm really glad to be with them. And the
mhm,
challenges of moving into really a new place, new community, um, all those challenges are rewarding because they challenge me to change and to see reality, and I think this is what we're really are talking about, to see reality as what it is, and to make some sort of peace with it, even if it's hard and it's unpleasant and it constantly is causing you hardship.
mhm. Absolutely. And I think that's a very practical way to look at it too. And I do want to clarify something specifically, which is we're talking about reality, but we could be talking about different things.
Yes.
So the abstractionist papers and all of natural reality, it deals with reality in a a different way than I've seen in philosophy or science or religion. Every tool is good for some jobs, but this is a new tool because it's very practical. It's a map, so it's not a theory of where we came from. It's not a theory of where the universe is going. It doesn't attempt to answer those bigger questions about what things are. What it does instead, just like the unhappiness letter does, is that it goes a different way. In this case, if I dare use the word, it goes orthogonal to what is. It goes into the world of how, which is how reality works but as I said, it's more like a map. So it's very practical stuff. Um, you may answer some bigger questions eventually, but its primary use, I think, in daily life really is to live a better life day to day with among other people, other processes that are emerging just as you are. So I just wanted to point that out to make sure when I say the word reality, that means what I mean. Does that make sense?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I do. I know exactly well, exactly is the wrong word. I do believe, I think I know, I understand what you're trying to say. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm qualifying it because these are your ideas. And to a large extent, these are ideas that you have come to from your own life experience. And the trick is to how to convey them in such a way that other people can see their own life experience in what you describe.
Mhm. Absolutely. That's why I say at the end of the book, this is the largest abstractionist job I've ever attempted, because that's absolutely true. You have to find the relationships that give rise to the forms that we see. And you can't be wrong. If the map is wrong, if you fall off a cliff, then you have to throw the map away, find a better map. So it has been sort of, that's why it took 8 years. Sometimes people ask, why did it take 8 years to do this? Um, yeah, it's a big job.
I'm looking at some of it. I printed off some of this morning because there was one piece that I wanted to read. Um, um, this is from in the book. This is part of a letter from the abstractionist. It all began with a simple need to understand how we navigate a universe we live inside but never see directly. As a child in Brazil, I watched our fish in the glass of their bowl, wondering what they thought about the world moving beyond. To them, everything must have seemed contained in that small space. They had no idea anything was happening outside. Years later, I recognized this as my childhood version of Plato's cave. We all start with one way of seeing. Learning to see differently takes effort. Picasso created 11 lithographs of the same bull, each one simpler than the last. He kept removing details until just a few essential lines remained, and somehow that captured the bull more truly than the realistic version. Abstractionism strips away what obscures until what matters stands alone. I thought that was really very well said, um, and I think it makes the idea of something that's being abstracted worth looking at because I think that abstractions have become um, uh, tools for denying reality. And what you're trying to say, I believe, is you're trying to create a sense of an appreciation for these abstractions as a way of actually revealing what reality is. Am I correct in that?
It's an interesting way to try to make sense of things without knowing what they are. Because if at the most basic level, um, what is anything? If you think about anything, what is it? We are reality. is relative, is relational. Um, and so learning a little bit more about relationships and how they work, which is an abstract world, I think pays off big time.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree.
But one more thing I want to say is you're right about the tool issue. If abstractions have been used for evil in the past, it's true that any tool can do that, from the hammer to the gun. And so that's something I've thought a lot about over the years, is these are tools, but you have to trust that humans are good and everybody wants to do well. So
And that's a starting point that allows you to enter into relationships. And when they prove to be um, not replicated or not, what's the word I'm looking for? When you find that
reciprocated.
reciprocated, that's the word I was looking for. When you find that they're not reciprocated, then that also just adds a dimension to reality that um, actually gives you an idea of, well, how do I actually relate to this person who is not reciprocating what I'm offering to them? Um,
Mhm.
and I think that's the beauty of it. I mean, I think it allows us to enter into the complexity of life without becoming overwhelmed by it at the same time.
I agree. I think there's a period of our lives where, for it's just natural. I think we're concerned about our own ideas of fairness in a way. We take them very seriously and we act on them, sometimes unthoughtfully, which is unfortunate, but it happens. Um, and then at some point, we just decide to be free of that.
Right.
And we decide to just love because that's what we want to do. We just want to give. Um, and I think the benefit of not expecting anything back, or not being attached to any expectation that you're going to just make away with all of that, just do what you want to do, um, is very freeing, incredibly freeing. So it works both ways. You give love, but you also give yourself freedom. And there was no exchange of anything.
I've said this many times. My grandmother told me when I was 12, you may do anything you want, but do not bring shame to the family name. Well, the important thing is not the family name thing. The important thing is that she gave me the freedom to do anything and go anywhere I wanted. And I followed that ever since. And I've reciprocated her belief in me by doing what I'm doing today, talking to you. And I see that there's this continuity over time. And the reality of my life, it really comes down to how I interact with people more than anything else. Um, but it is, there are problems where there are people that no, well, let me ask it this way. Um, let's look at this idea that you have
Hmm.
as something that's therapeutic. That
Okay.
if someone is having trouble in their life and they don't know why they're in trouble, they just know that nothing seems to be working for them. Everything seems to be working against them. They're constantly finding that people do not understand who they are or what they're doing, and but underneath all of that, they feel like I have a real clarity about who I am and what I want to do, but I don't fit very well. So how does, and maybe that creates trauma and whatever else would come. My point is that how can you take this idea that you have and treat it therapeutically as sort of a tool for um, addressing some of the deeper problems that may have as persons on a psychological level?
Okay, so first I have to start with the disclaimer that I don't have training in psychology or psychiatry. But as a layperson, and in the context of this work, I think the work is highly relevant to everything you described, because it deals head on with how the mind works, functionally speaking, and it deals head on with the human condition as
Mhm.
a natural byproduct of how the mind naturally processes conflict and emerges. So it's a natural process, but we interpret it as a condition, or maybe I do.
Well, yeah.
And so it does give you tools to understand, because it's like if you're very anxious about something but you don't know what it is, and then all of a sudden you realize what it is, that realization alone might help you manage the situation a lot better. Just realizing where you are. And the human condition is like having a pet, and you're like, kitty, 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 but it's a lion. It could literally kill you. And it happens, although in a very serious way, though. Be careful. Um, I have to be very careful with what I say here. I realize that. But in a very serious way, the human condition is the number one cause of human problems. So being able to see a map of how it builds up, how it accumulates, so that you have a shot at sitting on a different chair from time to time, observe your reactions, your feelings from a different place, and manage it in a different way, more deliberately, then that becomes a practice, just like anything. I mean, I practice every day, just like anybody would. But I think that's where a lot of the value comes from. Like the chronic sense of loneliness, the pervasive sense of loneliness, that's very natural. Understanding the natural reality framework gives you tools to put yourself in a position where you can at least identify and see the issues building up, and then it becomes a practice. And that's the goal.
So where do you come down on the debate? I'm going to call it a debate because I like debating this question that um, what we perceive as reality, and that is what reality is. And I'm willing to say that we only see a portion of reality, but reality is larger. It's almost the ethos of all that exists.
Right.
And but so where do you come down on perception as reality?
So natural reality is very clear about this, which will be nice to see, because and it also doesn't take a dual position. Like I think it's very natural with these ideas. It's like, which one is real? Does my mind pick up what's real, or does it not? As almost as if there was anything in between, or a different, totally different set of assumptions could be made. And so that's why natural reality is taught from first principles, because we start from a different place. We don't start from there. So we start from the idea that the mind is the inside. uh, let's just talk about human beings, make it easier, start from an easier place. So the mind is the inside of you, your mind as a process.
Hmm.
And outside of you, there is happening. Um, the mind doesn't see happening directly, but it gets clues from happening from signals that reach the boundary between your inside and your outside.
Uh-huh.
So your inside is your world of meaning. Let's land this a little bit to make it easier. Like everything you think, everything you see, every visual image that your mind is producing, uh, the stuff that's the happening is outside of you, but the images themselves, it's your mind. So that would be inside. And so what you end up with is not a debate as to which one is more real. You just have different types of reality. You have an interpretative reality, which is what we in human terms call the mind. That's your inside. And we have a causal reality, which is the world of happening, which is what you do and what you see. It's not what you see, but how signals get to you. That's your outside. And so we don't answer that question exactly. We just start from a different place. And so you have two worlds that are orthogonal to each other. they interact, but they don't merge into one another. They stay separate. Um, and reality is explained as a process that propagates between these two axes. So the axes are deemed orthogonal. And if you, I don't know, do you have, and do you know, let me see if there's a good analogy here. Like in signal processing, for example, orthogonal domains is something that people talk about all the time. It's the basis of the whole thing. And the analogy I would use there is if you have a signal propagating, and we imagine that as a sine wave or some kind of wave propagating. When we imagine that, what we're imagining is a happening. We're imagining a variation, an up and down, a frequency. Um, but to figure out what's inside the signal, we can get some idea from looking at the waveform, but to really figure out what's inside the signal, we apply what's called a transform, and we end up on what's called an orthogonal domain, the frequency domain. And then we can see what's inside the signal, the frequency content of the signal. But the signal propagates on in both ways, that you have both worlds happen concurrently. And in that same way, that's the analogy, one of the analogies we can use, even though it's too technical, I realize that. But that's the analogy we use to explain orthogonality in between red space and blue space.
So what what I'm hearing, and I think I would agree, is that we have a perception of what is happening outside of us. And that perception gets categorized in some way. The signal may be, we may see the signal as a wave, and it may be something totally else in actuality, but we can't, but merely because of our own limitations, our own incompleteness, our own um, journey of awareness, of consciousness, that we can't see the whole thing at once. So what we see of it is our perception of it, and it allows us to enter into, I'm going to call it a relationship with that thing that's outside of us. So for example, um, we're having rain here today. And I
Mhm,
look outside and I see the streets are wet. So I know I'm going to put on a raincoat when I walk out the door to go to the post office. Um, Now that rain is happening whether I perceive it or not. It's happening. That's the reality that's happening. And so, but my response to that is I'm going to put a raincoat on.
mhm,
And that my mind has mapped the reality out there to say that, okay, I need a raincoat if I'm going to go move through the reality of a rainy day here
mhm.
where I live.
And so I love that explanation because it takes me back to the earlier natural reality days where that's where I had the boundary. But
Hmm.
that's not the right place for the boundary. So the trick is, it's
Okay.
not that we perceive, it's not that we get some of the reality outside, is that the reality inside is of a different nature than the reality outside. We don't see any happening at all. In the example of the rain falling, I would agree with you that the rain is falling. I would agree with you that that's some kind of happening in everyday conversation. But in natural reality, that's our interpretation of a happening. The rain is falling in and of itself
Right.
is not the happening. The happening stays beyond reach. And so one of the beautiful things about this work is that once I had the boundary in the right place, which is we just don't see happening at all, um, then everything made even more sense. It was good at the beginning. The way you explained it to me makes perfect sense still. But once you take it, draw the boundary in a slightly different place, um, then that's where every idea in the book comes from. It's one idea, uh, kind of re-abstracted into many different contexts.
So why do we need to redraw the boundary?
Well, there are many reasons. One of them is we all like to think that we see people, that we are mindful with people, and we all are. And I'm also doing my best. Um, but nowadays, it's difficult for me to imagine really being able to appreciate and account for another process's presence, um, unless I had the boundaries drawn in this way, where meaning doesn't transfer between us. If you don't draw the boundary in this way, then you have the possibility of meaning transferring between us, but that never happens. Meaning always stays inside. And so that distinction is basic even at that level, just for appreciating other minds and allowing them to be, for instance, or maybe sometimes having to contain that mind. It depends on the situation. But just to, at a human level, be able to appreciate and account for each other, account for otherness is something I read once.
Hmm. I agree with that. And the trick, well, I see this very much on a human level. So you and I are having this conversation, and you have a reality, and I have a reality that is our own unique reality, and it operates within ourselves. And the challenge is how do we come and communicate with one another? How do we share? And this is where I think your thought about the the terrain, of reality being a map or something like that. I think that's really where it's helpful because what you're describing to me is your map of what you see, and I'm responding with, well, this is the map of what I see, and do these maps come together in a way that allows us to have a level of appreciation for the other that would not be there if we didn't have it at some level, having processed enough of reality so that we have a grasp of it, even if it's incomplete and maybe incoherent, but there's enough of it there for us to move forward in seeking for greater understanding.
Absolutely. And I think it seems counterintuitive perhaps to see the world in that way. Well, if meaning doesn't transfer, then what's the point of anything? I mean, that's a legitimate initial reaction to it, I think. Um, but once you kind of have a little bit of time to sit with it, you realize how magical everything really is. What you just described of us in the dark, because to me, my present experience right now is that you're on my screen in front of me. I know you're somewhere else, and um, but the real connection, I think, comes exactly from what you said. Is this the sense of connection comes from knowing that there's that disconnect, but we're still here, right? And we're building things.
Hmm.
So obviously, a productive space. I mean, that's just magical. And it's not just us. It's every natural process works in that way in the natural reality framework.
Yes, yes, I do see that, and uh, I th I think part of the trap that and I want to say this in the right way because um, I have a hard time accepting. It's not that I have a hard time accepting new ideas. I have a hard time accepting ideas to which I feel like were poorly conceived and became too powerful because they were easily manipulated into society. You know,
Right.
which is perception is reality is one of those because if what I perceive as reality, then just what is in my head is really insufficient for me to function as a human being. And
Oh
it
yeah.
that's what I come down to. I am starkly aware of what I don't know, and starkly aware of what I am incapable of knowing what to do or how to do it. And I see that um, absence, let me call it an absence of knowledge or absence of awareness as the domain of reality. Meaning I recognize that I have as much a challenge with living in the real world as anyone else. And I have, even as much as I've thought about it and have read about it and written about it, I am no expert because the domain or the ethos of reality is so broad and so expansive and so complex that it is impossible to grasp it in any level at any level of totality.
Mhm. I couldn't disagree with that. I think that's exactly why we took the how avenue to try to get to something useful, without necessarily having to have those answers. Um, and so the question, maybe we can go back just a minute if that's okay. But
Yeah.
the issue of which one is more real, right, is something that still comes up, like the fragments of reality, which reality. So the way natural reality works in a nutshell is, you're right, each one of us has its own version of reality that they produce inside of them. And to us, to each one of us, that reality being produced inside feels like it's the outside. In other words, whereas myself included, even in this moment, there's no escaping this, but we're living our inside lives outside
Hmm.
without being aware of it, at least not fully aware. Um, but both realities are are equally important, because reality wouldn't exist without meaning, wouldn't exist without happening, and happening wouldn't exist without meaning. They work sort of like yin and yang. Um, and so, of course, your actions flow into a space. You mentioned something about, our own minds are not big enough. It's true. That's why I suggest get out of there as best you can. I'm not the only one to say that. I follow other people who have similar messages in that regard, um, and so we have to. So we when you think about getting out of your mind, all of that means, I think, is just being able to see your own mind in a different way, where you can account for this this map, or maybe a better map, but something, as opposed to always being in the first person chair, right, and kind of battling it out every
Yeah.
moment. Hmm.
Well,
Um,
what I see, excuse me for interrupting you. What I see is that there is no place of more reality and less reality. It's all reality, and our understanding of it. I guess what I mean is that reality that is taking place inside of us
mhm,
is reality,
right.
and we should not denigrate ourselves by saying, "Well, I'm not, um, I'm not as far along, or I don't have as much an awareness. I'm not conscious enough." That question of enoughness in relationship to reality, I think, is a false reality. It's a false question because
Hmm.
you're already living in reality. You're already having to face the fact that it's raining outside, or I got to pay my bills today, or I got to do all these different things today. And the fact that we are able to do that is the fact that we have grasped some level of reality that enables us to function at
Hmm.
a fairly competent level. Uh,
Right.
but it's not like, oh, I mean, if we talk about the universe being as broad and as expansive as it is, well, because I don't understand all of that or don't have a grasp of all that, doesn't mean that I don't have a grasp of reality. I guess that's really what I'm saying. But I
Those are
see that
different
so
things.
much of
Yes.
that is what people are fed so that they feel less than what they should. And I just believe that your potential is simply waiting for you to tap into it and put it into motion.
So I'm going to try to start from what I think. I'm going to try to close out that issue of which reality is more important. But you said so many things that are interesting. I hope I remember at least one of them. Um, so obviously we have minds, we have insides, and well, maybe not obviously. That's one way to see it. We have minds, we have insides, and so which one is more important? Is it the reality outside of us? Is it the reality inside of us? And the reality inside, you're right, it's as important as the one outside. We don't take sides because what you think transforms into what you do or don't do. And what's happening, the actual happening around you is influencing you every second of your existence in ways that we can't even fathom. So the connection, I make these divisions for map making purposes. They're cartography tools, but there is one reality. It's just easier to understand how it works when you draw it up this way. Did that make sense? So
Yeah.
we're one difference though that is, I think, worth noting is our minds are individual realities,
Yeah.
but what we call the blue space, the world of happening, that world is shared. And that's something to keep in mind in different contexts as you go along. Which reality is more important? Well, it's going to depend on what we're dealing with, right? Like from maybe a legal perspective someday, who knows? But in our personal lives, sometimes there's going to be behavior that is where the behavior side is going to matter more for some reason than the story side.
Is there is there a context to reality?
I can't answer that question from where I am. I think reality. So
Well,
let me see if I can understand it better. Yeah, so let's
let
try
me
a little more.
describe it. Let me describe it this way. The fish in your fishbowl, their reality is wet. They're encompassed by water, and everything that they have known and experienced in life is from within that bowl. That is the context of their reality. And our context is different than the fish, but it's very similar, meaning there is something that encompasses us. And I think we define that as reality. And it's it's cause and effect, it's interaction, it's growth, it's seeing things change. I think all these things are part of that context that helps us to define, or in your words, map what reality is. And we learn how to negotiate or move through, travel through reality because of our experience of the context that we're actually living in. That's where I'm coming from.
Um, so we actually take the opposite road. I know it's going to sound crazy, maybe, but we try to be as context agnostic as we can be in this work, so it can apply in as many places as we can, personal lives and business and your creative work, whatever you do. So we're usually shying away, but we do have plenty of examples, I think, in the book of contextualized applications of all of these things. Um, One of the things that you mentioned earlier and didn't want to forget was the idea of my mind is not big enough for me kind of idea. I love that. I love the way you said that. I've never heard it said like that. It's kind of like this town's not big enough for me kind of thing. So
Yeah,
I loved
well,
it.
yes,
And
yes.
so, but that's very natural because everything that so when you think about natural reality in terms of potential and flow, just maybe try to contextualize things a little more. Um, you know, Potential and flow are ways to describe what we think about as energy. It's what makes things go. And there are two kinds of energy. The way we see it is there's potential energy, uh, in the mechanical world, for example, like you can either be in potential or you can be in flow. Like you can be charging a battery, accumulating potential, or you could be reading a book, accumulating potential. And then eventually that potential turns into flow, either because you flip the switch and you turn the circuit on. Now you're drawing current from the battery, so you turn potential into flow. Or because you read an amazing book and now you, I don't know, brought extra flowers for the wife, whatever it is. Um, and so that, even though it sounds like when you first start hearing about some of these ideas about meaning and happening, you're like, where's this going to go? It all connects with everything happening around us in like pretty elegant ways, I think. So, um, I welcome you to have a look, specifically if you want to look more at contextualized applications of natural reality. Chapter 3, I think that is probably the best one for that, because it takes the concepts that we've learned about the mind in chapters 1 and 2, theory of mind, and then individual minds and how they work. And then it applies it to a very wide number of like life scenarios, some of which I've seen or experienced myself, many of which I've just heard or made up. Um, but these loops that people get into when their potential and flow creates bad loops
Hmm. Or good loops.
or great loops. Let's
Yeah.
keep those going. I want the good vibes.
And I think it's where there are differences here. It's in to a certain extent in our language and the sources of our language. And I come out of an environment where relationships were center, and I view the world as entirely related. I don't see it as from a mechanistic point of view. In fact, I think the world as a mechanism is a really an inadequate and poorly conceived um, idea. I think there's interaction. See, I think that the boundaries are porous boundaries, and and we either allow them to be porous or we do not allow them to be porous. So I mean, I think about people that I meet. Um, I meet people every day and I have conversations with them, and some of them are not interested in having a conversation, and many of them are. And those that are, oftentimes it's because of something that I've said, some way that I've characterized it, and I'm using intentionally, I'm going to describe, I'm providing them a map of some perception of the world that that is similar to what they see, but maybe have not had the language to articulate what they see, that they feel it,
Okay.
and therefore they have not yet drawn their own map, so to speak.
Mhm. So that's exactly the type of thing that I think natural reality helps you see and understand in a way that once you see it, it becomes an unmistakable thing.
Hmm.
So when you have an idea, Ed, it's being produced in your inside, right, in your mind. Um, and so when you try to convey that idea to somebody, you can't convey the actual idea because you can't convey meaning. What you can do is you can produce some happening that becomes the expression of that idea. It's not the idea itself. The idea is cards that only you can see. They see the other side of the cards, right? They see some expression. And here's the crazy thing, that expression is of a different nature than than what you're doing. So it gets interpreted by them in their inside, in their totally in their way. You have absolutely no real control over how signals get interpreted by somebody else. And so to some people, when they see the expression is shared, but the idea was not. Remember, the idea stayed in your mind. So when they come up with their own idea, it's theirs. about that expression. And if it's like a puzzle piece, like a jigsaw puzzle, and it doesn't match whatever they've been working on, they're likely to just want to discard it. Like, this doesn't make sense. That messes up my whole thing. I don't want to deal with it. And in natural reality, I get that a lot. But if you,
I understand that.
for some people, when they see the expression, it rings the right bells. They've been primed, they primed themselves for that. And so their affordances are right, it maybe is one way to say it. Um, and so when they interpret it, it's in a way that's compatible with the way you intended. It doesn't need to be the same idea, by the way, but it's compatible. And so now you have an understanding, and then you develop the relationship in that way. But it's sort of a matter of tuning.
I see it as, how do we communicate sufficiently that we can take one more step together along a path?
Yes. Yes.
And
Hmm.
what I see is that most of this, or a lot of this, is not happening in the mind itself. It is happening throughout our entire bodies. Our bodies are the mechanism of discovering and identifying what this reality is.
So let me try to illuminate this with a little bit of natural reality. So what we call once you sit long enough with the idea that everything you touch, everything you see, everything you feel is quite literally inside of you and not outside. One of the nice things about the papers is that it's available online, and at least so far it's only available online, so I have control over it. And a couple of weeks ago, I decided to go back to a project from 2019, which was called Abstractionism 101. And it had some of these diagrams, not the last one, but it had the first three, and the fourth one was different. And I had a chance to just add that to the book, which has been a dream of mine to do something like this. And so what that is these are different ways of seeing, essentially. We call them models, but it's just a way of seeing, interpreting um, what you see. And so they kind of grow from simplest to most, they're all very important. They all carry their own weight. And I use them a lot in the way that natural reality really is living strongly today, and has been for a few years, is in my patent practice, of all places, because new inventions come in, and um, there's a high percentage of them that they come in from a place that you've never been. So you don't know how it works, you don't know what it is, and you have to try to make sense of it very fast. And I describe it as a dark room. So you walk into a room, you don't know where anything is, and then you have to shine the light in the right corners to kind of figure out where you are. Um, so those are tools to help with that. Um, and there's a list of them. It goes from a boundary model, they have their own names, a bipolar model, a selection model, and then the reality model, which is what I used to develop natural reality. Of course, these things sort of grew together. One didn't produce the other. It's not, the chicken and the egg. I hope we're past that. um,
Yeah,
but that's what that was for. And also, I was hoping to, um, it was always a dream of mine, maybe not one of the biggest dreams, but it was always a dream of mine. Midway through my practice over the last 24 years, I had this sort of nagging idea that what we were doing day to day at our desks really wasn't so much engineering or even law, or in a way, it wasn't really about patents or inventions. It was really about developing quick ways of seeing things, making sense of them, um, to be able to then do your job with them, because everybody will know if you don't, like, you can't hide the text you end up writing at the end. So I wanted to, I always had this feeling that there was more to it, but I didn't know how to articulate it at the time. And then several months after the book was published, I thought, why not? I might as well fit that in while I can, right? And so
yeah.
that's how we got there. It's called the Abstractionist Toolkit, and it sits at the very end before the before the study materials, maybe. So it's there.
It's um it's in the afterword.
Afterward, yes, yes, absolutely. So it's right after a letter from me, that
That's
letter
right.
you read.
That's right.
Thank you.
It's
Yeah,
right after the letter from the abstract. Yeah,
yeah.
which I
Hmm.
found very, very helpful.
Hmm.
Uh, so where do you hope for this what do I call it? This idea that's now been um, crafted into a book is continuing as they say it's books are never finished, they're just abandoned, but you haven't finished it, so you're continuing to expand upon it. Where do you hope to see this go?
So that's a good question. Thank you. I'm sorting that out now, actually. I feel like the writing phase for this project is essentially coming to an end. The editing, I think, goes on forever.
Hmm.
There's no reason not to. Just constant improvement. It helps me with my own practice, frankly, to go back in and rethink through some things. Um, so that keeps going. But the writing phase has ended. I feel like this was a project for the kids mainly and really all along. So I call it my mission accomplished, for better or worse. Yeah, but I'm really happy about it. So now it's a matter of like how to disseminate something that when you express it, people don't have anything to match to in their minds, and so they reject it, and they
Right.
don't even know what they missed. Um, and so that's an obstacle, right? It's part of this dissemination. But it remains to be seen. I do have a lot of other things happening as well. So the writing phase is done. This is potentially my only podcast ever. So thank you for having me. But the kids and I continue to work together nowadays on this stuff, which is the icing on the cake for me. So
How old are your kids?
they're four from 21 all the way to 10. So
And what has been their reaction or response to this?
well, they grew up with it. You know, my divorce, my oldest one then was 10. And this stuff didn't start to really bloom until after that. So, and my youngest one at the time of the divorce was 5. So they were in that age where they kind of still mostly kind of growing up with it. And my 10-year-old, uh, we're doing fifth grade math every night now.
Mhm.
He definitely kind of grows up with a lot of these concepts. We don't necessarily talk about emergence or incoherence or anything like that, but just the different ways of seeing are definitely, I'm trying to build that in while I can.
So he's not talking about his father with his crazy ideas.
That hasn't happened yet, but he's 10.
I know. Well, I've gotten that from my own kids, so uh, which I appreciate, and they say it in love and knowing that I take it in the right sense. So
Mhm. Yeah.
I think you're onto something really significant. I think um, you're exploring something which has not been adequately explored, and I look forward to seeing where you take us. Um, I think we do share some differences in the way we perceive this, but I think that's partly because our realities have been different through the course of our lives, and and so where we're able to come together and have this conversation, I think is really significant and testimony to what you've created, and I'm grateful that you've been with us today.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, Ed. I couldn't think any higher of you. I remember when I started doing through the article writing phase where I was putting things on LinkedIn, and it really seemed to be looking at them, which was my motivation to keep going for, every time somebody seems to look at one of your things, they're like, oh, I got to fix it. So thank you very much. Thanks for having me on the show. If you have any questions about natural reality, feel free to call.
Well, it's
Again,
been
the book is free. By the way, I'll just say this one more time
yeah.
so people can find it. It's again, welcome to the bluespace.com. And the book is free. Um, it's also one last thing. It's a big piece of work. If I didn't think it was worth reading, of course, I wouldn't have written it. But I realized that it is quite a bit of reading. So there is another way in, and it's a 10-minute version of the Abstractionist papers. It's also free. Everything is free, by the way. Uh, welcome to the bluespace.com, and it's called Glitches in Reality. And that little booklet, in just a few pages, gives you the flavor of natural reality and how it would apply to life, to science, to everything. It won't have the same effect of having the ideas being carefully induced and growing inside in a recursive way, in
Yeah.
the same way that the papers does. It doesn't do that, but it's like a shortcut. And so we'll get you there faster. We'll get you somewhere faster. And then you can decide if you want to do the papers or not.
And so through your website, that's the best way to find you if people want to talk with you about this.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And you'll keep posting on LinkedIn too, I suspect.
Every now and then. So the problem is the dissemination work is a different thing. It's like a different layer
Yes,
of
it is.
reality.
Yes, it
And
is.
so now the whole learning starts again. It's kind of like getting a black belt in whatever you practice, right? Now you're like, okay, well, I feel like I did good work here, but really, just a different way to begin.
Yeah,
And
I,
so
I agree with you.
more emergence, hopefully, ahead.
Well, keep at it, and we'll keep watching and reading, and appreciate you coming on here. And I hope everyone that you have been sufficiently challenged to think about yourself and the world that you live in, so that you will maybe not take it for granted as much as maybe you have been. So I wish you well. Thank you, Luis.
Thank you, Ed.
Thanks for being here, and
Thank you very much.
we will see you next time here on the Eddie Network podcast. Bye bye.